Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. $347 times head coach Don Shula went to battle in the NFL and came out victorious. He holds the record for most wins in the history of the NFL with 347. It seems like rather a random number, but it represents quite an accomplishment. I have another number for you to consider today. That number is this: 429, which is 82 higher than the previous number, 429. That number may seem random as well, but it represents a number of victories of sorts. 429 is the number of Jesus Changes Everything podcasts we've been able to put out in this iteration. That is, for 429 straight weekdays, we have put out this podcast. Now, I mention the number because I thought I'd take the time to figure out the number today. I didn't know where we were. I didn't know how far we were from some reasonable benchmark, but we ended up at 429. And despite the fact that it's not a nice round number, it struck me that this is quite an accomplishment. Podcasting as an idea is easy. Getting started is easy. Having something to say, that's a little bit harder. But having the consistency to put out a podcast day in and day out, that's something to be grateful for and pleased with. I am grateful for God's grace in allowing us to do this 429 times. And I hope that we will continue to be able to do this indefinitely. I don't know what that final number will be. For all I know, it could be 429. But I don't expect that to be the case. Our plan and our hope is to continue each weekday to provide the Jesus Changes Everything podcast. And in this podcast, 429 days, we have sought to encourage you, the listener, to adopt the perspective that Jesus does, in fact, change everything. That his work and his ongoing work changes us, changes the world around us. Just a few moments ago, I recorded for my other podcast, Ask RC, an answer to this question: is social justice biblical? And one of the things I emphasized in that brief 5-minute podcast was simply this: that Jesus changes everything. That the idea that the work of Christ is somehow sealed off from social issues is ridiculous. But that works both ways. One, that means that yes, Jesus matters to our social lives, but it also means that Jesus is the one who decides what justice is, not social justice warriors. Now, that's That's not the scope of our focus. Our focus is why Jesus changes everything. And through this podcast, he's been changing me too. I continue to enjoy it. It's still my favorite part of my day when I get the opportunity to record. I even enjoy the production work after I've finished recording. But there's one thing I don't like. I don't like this segment. I don't like that every week I come seeking partners. But I keep doing it because that's how I can keep doing this and keep serving God's people. And so I'm coming again today on the occasion of our 429th episode to ask you to please consider coming alongside the Jesus Changes Everything podcast and supporting what we've been doing. Whether you've been listening for a few days, whether you've been listening for a few months, whether you've been listening going back to 2019, we're asking you to consider to please support this work. Make it possible for us to keep going and keep going and keep going. I've got so much more for us to talk about the things that Jesus changes. Will you please prayerfully consider giving to this work? I want you right now, because this is what happens. What happens, I don't know what the percentage is, obviously, but people listen, people hear this segment, people think, yeah, I need to support that, and they don't do it right now. And then it never gets done. Will you please, right now, go to rcsprouljr.com. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your iPad. You can do it on your laptop. You can do it on your desktop. Anywhere. rcsprouljr.com. Right on that front page, there's a donate button. Click that button and follow through. I would love to have 429 monthly donors come through today and move forward and continue to grow and continue to reach more people and continue to improve and continue to be part of what Jesus is changing. Thank you for listening. It's time once again for another segment of curating your movie library, and the movie that we're going to cover today is Unknown. Yes, it is, in fact, Unknown. By the way, that laugh is my precious wife. Thank you for being with us, my sweet.
Thanks for having me.
And the movie we're going to talk about is actually called Unknown. And but we do know it. We do like it. This was one of those movies that when you're sort of scrolling through your streaming service, looking to see what's available, I saw it. I had seen it already, and I was like, Lisa needs to see this. Mm-hmm. I know I will like it, and I'm pretty confident she will like it too. This is very much more up my alley than yours. It's kind of a thriller.
It is.
Not gentle, but it wasn't especially violent by any stretch of the imagination. But the storyline in Unknown, well, in a sense, it's unknown too. You don't really know what's going on. And I've said that on this show. I've said it to you many times. There's nothing I love better than a movie where I don't know what's going on.
Where you get tricked.
Yes.
Your mind gets tricked.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we start off with this husband and wife. They're traveling to Berlin.
We assume they are a husband and wife.
Don't give that stuff away. They're presented.
I'm so bad.
They're presented to us as a husband and wife.
Yes.
And they're traveling to Berlin to where the husband's going to speak at a conference on agriculture. Right? He's a professor of some kind, of biology professor. You want to?
Well, I was just thinking about. I remember the very first opening scene where they're traveling, and it seems as though they're a disgruntled married couple because there's kind of a coldness there.
Okay. Well, yeah, and when you know things, you can look back and think,
say,
what did I miss?
Ah!
Sort of like the Sixth Sense, where you go back and, spoiler alert, realize that nobody actually speaks face-to-face to Bruce Willis.
Right.
So they're on this trip to Berlin. He's going to speak at this event. They take a taxi to the hotel, but one of his bags gets left behind. Mm-hmm. And while she's trying to check in, he ends up going back to the airport to get this missing bag. And along the way, he's in a car accident, ends up in a coma.
Well, but another thing is she sees him leave and he never comes to tell her,
Right.
hey, honey, I got to go. So you're
Right.
thinking, well, that's weird.
It is weird, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what else you may remember is she's having trouble checking in because there's somebody already checked in under that name in that room.
Yes.
Okay. That's sort of a foreshadowing about what's to come. So Liam Neeson's in this accident and ends up in a coma, ends up in a hospital. And when he wakes up, he has a level of amnesia such that at first he can't remember who he is. And he's there for 4 days. Mm-hmm. And I think, you may remember better, but I think he was maybe just flipping through the TV channels. And there was a news story about the conference. And it made him realize, I'm supposed to be speaking there. And so he sort of takes himself out of the hospital in a hurry, goes over to the hotel, and tries to go into the meeting place where they're having like a dinner that night or something.
Like a gala
yes,
event.
Exactly right. And they don't want to let him in because someone by his name's already there. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to get the attention of the big boss of the event, and he won't pay him any mind. Mm-hmm. And eventually he tracks down his wife, who insists she doesn't know him. And along comes Aidan Quinn, who claims to be her husband. What in the world
is going on? It's unknown.
Yes, it is unknown. And I'm going to have to stop there on the plot summary because everything else would be a spoiler and a reveal. But that's the kind of thing where, again, you literally, you're like, what?
We were on the edge of our bed.
Yeah, we were trying to, we just had no idea. And they did a really nice job of teasing out information along the way. They kept you hungry for the first bit, the first sort of crack of light coming into the story about what is, and then just slowly revealing more and more, and then you, even after you know everything, you still have to see whether or not he's going to work everything out the way he's going to want to. You've heard me talk about this principle, where I always say I really believe any movie should be able to reach standard X. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a life-changing experience. It doesn't have to shape my spirit. It just needs to be this good. Mm. And if it's not, it's a real disappointment. If it is, I'm satisfied. This movie definitely hit that mark. It wasn't a life-changer, but it was engaging.
Yeah, it was good. We were satisfied.
And good acting.
Yeah, very good acting.
Yeah, and Liam Neeson plays a lot of characters that I don't much care for along the way. Mm-hmm. And he's very well known, but what's interesting to me is I never have the problem of, I'm watching Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
He's good enough that he actually becomes the character that he's playing, even when he doesn't know who he is. Well, sweetheart.
Such a good movie.
It was a good movie, and it was a great time watching it with you. I look forward to something new tonight. We'll see. Then perhaps we'll bring it and share it in some future time with our audience. Thank you for being with me.
Dear, you're the best date ever.
You are, my love, and I love you.
I love you.
Are we co-creators with God? Yes and no. First, to the no. Theologians who like to make distinctions distinguish between God's communicable attributes and his incommunicable attributes. The former are those which he can and does share with us, though, of course, in lesser degrees. God, for instance, knows things. and we know things. He, however, knows all things, and knows them exhaustively and immediately, and we do not. The latter refer to those qualities that are his alone. God, for instance, is immutable, while we are not. He cannot change, and we do in fact change. If ever there were an incommunicable attribute, however, it would be this: God is self-existent and eternal. We assuredly are not. God alone is self-existent and eternal, and all other things are dependent upon him. Are we then creators in this sense? Of course not. We are, however, God's vice-regents, those who rule under him. We are the stewards of his creation. And in calling us to exercise dominion over the creation, to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, he is calling us to reflect his glory, to be images of what he has done in the creation. As we bring all things under subjection by his power and for his glory, as we, the church, act as a helper to our husband, the second Adam, in his call to bring all things under subjection, we enter into his work with him. In this sense, it would be fitting to say that we are co-creators with God. That said, there are at least two different groups that are terribly confused on this issue. Prosperity preachers, some of them anyway, have been known to teach what has come to be known as the little gods doctrine. These folks, many of whom glut our airwaves, suggest that just as dogs have puppies and cats have kittens, so God begets little gods. This particular ancient heresy is explained and answered quite well in a fine book titled The Agony of Deceit, edited by my friend Dr. Michael Horton. The second group is the Eastern Orthodox Church with its doctrine of theosis. Here, salvation is less about our being declared just by the finished work of Christ on our behalf and being adopted into God's family, and more about how God's grace is poured into us, making us partake more fully in the divine nature. You can read more about theosis in any dictionary of theology or online. It's important for us to keep always before us, not just touching on creation, both the similarities and the differences between us and God. The classic doctrine that affirms that we have been made in the image of God, the imago Dei, gets it precisely right. When we embrace this doctrine, we affirm the imputed dignity of man. When we remember that we are made in the image of God. We escape, however, the temptation of the serpent when we remember that we are made in the image of God. We are neither cosmic accidents nor gods. We are men made in his likeness for his glory. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com and join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.